Alright, ladies and gents, Darkside Phil here, and welcome to my review for Vampyr. This is a very different style game from game developer Don't Nod, a game developer who previously had made games such as Remember Me, which incidentally almost no one remembers, or more recently a game that we all remember, Life is Strange. Vampyr is nothing like either of those two games. The best way that I can describe Vampyr for you is a hybrid game combining action-style RPG-esque combat, think Bloodborne or Dark Souls, more so Bloodborne though, set in a Gothic-style London atmosphere a la Bloodborne, combined with story aspect, in particular, branching dialogue choices of a game such as Mass Effect, okay? Or I guess you would say other games recently, games like Deus Ex or something like that. And it's kind of interesting because it really does feel as you play Vampyr that if they had maybe refined the game a little bit further, that maybe this game could have been something great. Because, you know, one of the major complaints I have about the From Software series is that the combat's great, but the story is all fleshed out in the descriptions of items in the game. You know, you find a sword, you read it, oh, now I learned about that boss, the lore of that boss, and the background, a little bit of the story of the game, right? In Vampyr, this game dares to combine a really rich and kind of engrossing narrative with that same kind of gameplay from those harder style RPG games, but sadly it comes up kind of short and it feels pretty disjointed. All right, allow me to explain. So Vampyr, set in Gothic London, there is an outbreak, an epidemic, where people are becoming infected with originally what they thought was the Spanish influenza, but in reality is actually this vampire plague. People are turning into monsters in the streets. And Dr. Jonathan Hale ends up getting bit by, is it Jonathan Hale? I don't even remember his fucking last name. His name's Jonathan. It's Jonathan Reed, excuse me. Dr. Jonathan Reed gets bit by a vampire and becomes one. Unbeknownst to him, he doesn't even know what's going on. His sister finds him after him being missing for like 2 days. She finds him, and then he loses his mind. He's in this bloodlust. He bites his sister and kills her. Okay, now, but overcome with guilt that he had killed his sister, not knowing what made him a vampire, he sets out to figure out, what is going on? How did I become a vampire? Who bit me? What is this epidemic running in the streets of London? Eventually, he runs into another fellow doctor by the name of Dr. Swansea, who's running this kind of hospital in the center of London, along with a supporting cast of characters, nurses and other doctors, who are basically trying to heal the sick and figure out what the hell is going on. And so it's going to be Jonathan's job, or Dr. Reed's job, through the course of Vampyr, to go throughout the different boroughs of London, talking with different groups of people, trying to figure out exactly, what is at the bottom of this whole epidemic and what is causing this outbreak of vampirism and almost, cannibalism and fighting in the streets. There's various groups throughout London that are seeking and vying for power. There's the monsters, also known as the Skulls, which are basically kind of deformed humans. They're not true vampires, but they're certainly not human. They're kind of monsters that are just violently attacking people for no matter what. There are the true vampires who are in the streets as well. Then there are different groups of like vampire hunters that are setting out to stop this thing. They're going out in the streets with guns and crucifixes and holy water, and they're trying to fight off all these monsters and take control of the streets. Being that you're a newly crowned vampire, no one's safe. Like you get attacked by the random monsters, you get attacked by these crusaders, you get attacked by everybody. Okay, so anywhere you go in London, you're going to get attacked by random groups of people. Your home base for the course of Vampyr is the hospital, as you're working for Dr. Swansea to try to get to the bottom of what is going on with this epidemic. But over the course of the game, you'll also find various safe houses throughout the game that are basically safe places where no one's going to attack you. Because in reality, the game of Vampyr is very similar to Bloodborne. What you're going to be doing is going through this big open world that's all connected, these different boroughs of London, and you're going to constantly just be attacked randomly by monsters or by the Crusaders. Now, it's kind of interesting the way they do this. Unlike other games, like, again, Bloodborne or Dark Souls wouldn't do this, but in this game, every enemy has a level. So you actually know what level you are when you start, and every enemy has a level. And the higher the level, that means they have more health, more damage, probably more abilities, and if they are really high level compared to what level you are, you probably want to stay away from them, all right? But in general, what I discovered playing Vampyr is that you can basically take on any enemy in the game at any level and win as long as you're really good. If you've played games like Dark Souls or Bloodborne, in particular Bloodborne, where there's no blocking or parrying, but if you're really good at dodging, if you're really good at managing what you have during combat, you can pretty much overcome any obstacle in this game. I was pretty much underleveled for the vast majority of the game, but was actually able to win many, many fights, okay? Now, in a moment, I will explain how combat works, but a key component that I must explain to you before we even get to that is the leveling system, how it works, and how it ties into the story. Because during the course of Vampyr, you're going to run into a ton of NPCs, these people who are, characters who you can talk to, and through their dialogue trees, all right, the more you talk to them and the more dialogue trees you unlock by choosing certain options, you're going to unlock more information about each character. And what you'll notice that each character has two different critical stats. Number one, their health, meaning are they sick or are they healthy? And number two, how much information have you unlocked from that character by talking to them. And sometimes you'll talk to maybe someone else in town who knows more about that character, and you'll unlock a new dialogue tree for them when you go back to them to unlock even more backstory and stuff. Sometimes if you talk to them long enough, you'll actually unlock a side quest line, which just is an alternate investigation towards the main story or outside of the main story. Maybe you're looking for a hidden item, someone who's lost in the city, something like that. Maybe there's an optional fight that you need to do, and once you conclude those, you'll unlock even more dialogue options and things for the people. So why do you care about if these people are healthy and the more you know about them? Well, because a critical game mechanic of Vampyr is drinking the blood of the NPCs of the game to gain experience points and level your character up, or purposely abstaining from doing so. Now, this is completely unique. I've never played a game that had a game mechanic like this before, where I could do multiple missions, talk for a character for 5 to 10 hours, and then suck their blood and they're out of the game permanently, okay? Now, if you eat the blood of someone and they're not healthy, you're going to get way less experience, okay? If you take the time to get random items throughout the world through looting, through fighting enemies or whatever, and crafting a potion or an antidote to cure whatever their ailment is, like for example, if a guy has a headache, if you cure his headache, you talk to him a lot, you unlock a lot of his dialogue choices, you do a side quest for him, all of a sudden his bar of experience will be like maxed, and then if you mesmerize him with your vampire powers and drink his blood, you'll get a giant chunk of experience points to level up your character. But one of the big dichotomies about Vampyr is that even though this all sounds great, if you go crazy drinking the blood of all the NPCs in the game, you get a bad ending. In fact, the first time you ever drink the blood of an NPC, you get a bad ending. So you basically have to choose it during the course of the game. Am I really going to, challenge myself and be underleveled for this playthrough and not drink the blood of the NPCs to try to get the best ending of the game? Or am I going to actually just say, fuck yeah, I just want to turbo through the game and have an easy time? And from what I understand, if you do lure a lot of these NPCs through all the dialogue trees and drink all their blood, by the end of the game, you could be incredibly overpowered and you turbo through it and the game's super easy, but you get a really bad ending, okay? For me, I opted to not drink anybody's blood. So I was unlocking side quests for the sake of getting experience points by completing those quests, but I never drank the blood of anyone, which made the game very, very challenging for me. And I think it's going to give me a unique perspective as I review this game, because the game was a lot harder for me than it was for a lot of people who said, screw it, I'm just going to go ahead and drink everyone's blood, okay? Now, the other side of the game is the combat, all right? Allow me to explain to you how the combat works. Basically, there's 3 main things you do in Vampyr during combat. Number 1, you're dodging and striking. Think Bloodborne. You have a main weapon that you find, and there's many different weapons in the game. There's one-handed weapons, there's two-handed weapons that'll stun more and do more damage, but they're much slower. And you're going to do basic combo, 1, 2, 3 hit combos, and a lot of enemies will have like super armor, so you hit them 2 or 3 times, then you got to dodge as they counterattack, and then hit them from behind. Again, think Bloodborne. It really is, in a lot of ways, very similar to the combat of Bloodborne, okay? There's a lock-on system, just like Dark Souls and Bloodborne, so you can easily dodge around, managing your stamina and attacking. Every attack you do uses stamina. Every dodge you do uses your stamina, okay? But unlike From Software games, there's very few healing items in this game. You can craft potions, but you have to craft them at workbenches in the game, which uses components you find throughout the game that are kind of scarce. So in reality, what you need to do is be a vampire and drink blood. And you may say, but I thought you just said in your playthrough you didn't drink any blood. I didn't drink any blood from NPCs. However, when you're fighting the random enemies out in the world, it's perfectly acceptable to drink their blood. This is a main gameplay mechanic of the combat of Vampyr. And the way that it works is that you need to stun the enemy first, then drink their blood when they're stunned, which will fill up your blood meter, which then allows you to use various different vampire abilities, which you unlock through experience points. So by doing missions, by eating NPCs if you decide to, and through combat, you will earn tons of experience points, which whenever you find a bed in one of the safe houses or at the hospital in the game, you can level up your character, okay? So, the ideal way to really play Vampyr is. You see some enemies coming? Well, it's kind of rock, paper, scissors, because you've got three things. You've got melee combat, you've got ranged combat with guns, as you find throughout the game, and you've got your blood or vampire abilities, okay? And every enemy you'll actually see when you approach them, you'll see a level, like I told you, a level number, but also you'll see it'll tell you what their weaknesses are, or not their weakness, excuse me, but what they're strong against. So you might run into a random big burly man, and he's really strong against the blood vampire abilities and melee, so that means really you gotta stick and move around him and maybe use your guns, or try to stun him and keep drinking his blood to get him to die that way, okay? Or you may see a guy that's really tough against guns and, blood, so now you gotta just go melee straight up, and he may be like a tank, but he actually takes damage from the melee, so you gotta dodge skillfully and just keep hitting him, and micromanaging your stamina. Ideally, the way that I found is the best way to play the game is a combination of everything, okay? You're going to use a stake to hit repeatedly, stun them, drink their blood. Now you have blood, so now you start attacking. Oh no, I got hit. Heal yourself quickly, which is one of the vampire blood abilities. Back off. Do a ranged vampire blood ability, of which there's several different ones. I used one that throws like a blood dart at the enemies, like a blood spear from a distance. Eventually you unlock an ultimate ability, and that's up to you, whatever you choose. The one I chose stunned the opponent for about 5 to 10 seconds while it sucked their health out of them, and also there was an explosion that would deal damage, and it would allow me to do whatever I wanted. So if I wanted to unload with my gun or do melee attacks, I would do that, okay? There's also shadow abilities in the game, which are very similar to the blood abilities, except they use a different kind of like a shadow meter. I never unlocked them because the bottom line is, because I wasn't eating the NPCs, I never really had a lot of energy, or excuse me, a lot of experience to put into unlocking abilities. I had to kind of micromanage. Okay, I want more health. I want to have more stamina. I want to have a blood ability level up. I want to heal more when I use my healing ability, and I want my alternate to be slightly better, and also biting. Because like I said, after you hit them a few times, you drink their blood, you can make it so that it actually deals significant damage as you drink their blood. You could have a bigger blood meter, so you could do more vampire abilities. All these things are available, and I never got a chance to do anything with the shadow abilities because the experience was so scarce for me because I wasn't killing NPCs, okay? So, all of this sounds great on the surface. Wow, this sounds like kind of a rock, paper, scissors scenario. If you're fighting an enemy that's strong against melee, use something else against him, right? You're going to stun him, drink his blood, attack until you get hurt, use your abilities to use your blood. Oh, I'm low on blood. Stun him, drink his blood, wash, rinse, repeat. That really is the combat of the game. However, sadly, the combat does kind of start to fall flat about halfway through the game, especially, again, if you haven't been drinking the NPC blood. Almost all the enemies in this game will kill you with 2 to 3 hits. Like, halfway through the game, you'll be like level 10, 15, and you'll be fighting level 20, 25 enemies, and they will kill you with just a few hits. So the game literally becomes Bloodborne or Dark Souls if you go the good route and try not to drink the blood of NPCs. So at that point, you may just say, throw up your hand and say, well, screw it, throw away the whole premise of doing it, but then you're going to get a bad ending. And I think that's actually one of the game design flaws of the game. If you want to get a good ending, you really have to put yourself into a hard position and a hard, difficult time to actually see the true good ending. And that's really annoying in my opinion. You should at least be able to get like a neutral ending if you drink some blood, but not all of it, but it doesn't exist. No matter what, if you drink blood, you're going to get a bad ending, okay? And that's kind of shitty in my opinion. Now, the combat of the game at first seems too easy. Like, at the beginning of the game, it's like, wow, this is fucking so easy. Just dodge, dodge, stab, stab, use a blood ability, drink the blood, dodge, dodge, stab, stab. Super easy. Later on in the game, you'll find the guns are a lot better than you thought. If you, especially during the course of the game, you can also level up your weapons by finding random loot throughout the world, or, you know, enemies will drop loot. And you can level up your weapons at the workbench to give them better abilities, like increased damage, uses less stamina when you use them. In particular, the guns can get really good if you power them up to do tons of damage, because not only are you dealing stun with the gun, you're dealing damage. So you can do tons of damage and then stun the enemy to drink their blood, which is a pretty damaging thing. The problem is the ammo in the game is scarce. Ammo in this game is very scarce, okay? So maybe every 2-3 fights you'll get a couple bullets. So you have to be very, very calculated with what you're going to do when it comes to bullets. And by the way, there are vendors in the game you could buy items from, but usually they don't have the best ones. They won't sell more than 1 or 2 bullets at a time. So if you actually want to go ahead and, you know, use the guns all the time, you're not going to be able to. Guns have to be a calculated use, all right? Another thing that really pissed me off during the course of this game has checkpoints, a checkpoint system. Unlike Dark Souls, if you play Dark Souls or Bloodborne, you die, you go back to the last bonfire or the last lamp, right? In this game, no, there's actually checkpoints. So you may be outside the room of a boss, you run in, you're fighting a boss, and you use your gun, you're shooting the boss. Uh-oh, the boss killed you. Well, guess what happens? The game will respawn you outside the door to do the fight over again. So you don't have to go back to a bonfire, which is good. But the game then depletes your inventory of anything you fucking used. So let's say you fought a boss for the first time. You don't know his attack patterns, you're learning them or whatever. Alright, oh man, I'm dying. Let me drink a healing potion. Oh man, let me use my gun. Boom, 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 boom. You get the boss down to this much health, the boss kills you. Oh, you respawn outside the door, you have no items. So now there's no way you could get back to where you were against that boss because you can't heal and you can't use your gun. That's ridiculously frustrating. Like, at least in Bloodborne, when you die and you go back to the lantern, then you could go back to the Hunter's Dream and you can restock on your items. Not so in Vampyr. In Vampyr, it's literally like, if you don't one-shot this guy, you're fucked. So what I ended up doing during the course of my game is a lot of the times when I fought a boss for the first time, I wouldn't even use my ammo. Or I would just like, no, I'm not going to use my gun. I'm not going to use a healing potion until I learn this guy's patterns. Then later on, I'll use those items so that I know that I can beat this boss. In fact, this was pretty funny. The very end of the game, the final boss, okay, has two forms. I waited the second form. I never used a bullet because I was like, if I die, I'm going to have no bullets. And then I won and I was like, so I could have used bullets and it would have been way easier, but I was so afraid to use them because I thought I would die and not have them and not be able to win. So that's what I mean. Like, the game's design is kind of weird and flawed. The combat feels like it wants to be Bloodborne, but it just comes up way short. It just doesn't feel as good as Bloodborne's. And honestly, like I said, if you really want to get the good ending in the game, this game becomes incredibly difficult at the end. I mean, bosses will two-shot you. There are some bosses at the end that are so overpowered and overleveled compared to you, they will just go, whip, whip, you're done. And then you have to start the whole fight over. And it's like, holy shit. Like, you really got to be a perfectionist to do well in this game if you're going to go the good ending route, okay? The other problem that I have with this game is that it's not balanced very well. And what I mean by that is there is a lot of narrative. Trust me, there's a ton of narrative. And if you like a Gothic style, British style narrative with vampires, if you read a lot of British literature, or you like that Gothic feel, think Sherlock Holmes and stuff like that, you're going to like this game. In fact, I would actually say the plot of this game in a lot of ways, since you're investigating the epidemic, is more like a mystery than like a horror game. You're really, you know, what is causing these people to become infected and become these mutated skulls or these other monsters or vampires? What is the root cause of the epidemic? Who is it that turned Dr. Reed into a vampire? All these are like investigative things you do. In fact, your side missions are called investigations in this game. Again, almost like Sherlock Holmes. The main character could have been fucking called Sherlock Holmes and it would have made sense to me. Seriously, that's what the game felt like, okay? But the game is not paced well. It's not balanced well. And what I mean by that is there are entire segments of the game where you'll run to a new settlement, and now there's like 10 NPCs you need to talk to all at once to unlock parts of the side content in the story, and you're there for 2 hours just talking with dialogue trees and the like. And you're like, God, you know, it would have been nice if there was like a half an hour, then a break. No, it's like, got to talk to everyone now for 2 fucking hours. Then you go to do a little bit of combat, right? And then it's more talking, or vice versa. It's tons of combat and no talking. It's like they didn't break the game up into good segments or a good enough mix in between. It's like, here's a big fucking story segment, 2 hours of talking, and you fall asleep. Then next thing you know, 2 hours of fucking, you know, combat, and then you get all confused. Another big problem with the game that I had, the waypoints sometimes don't work. So let's say you have a main mission somewhere you're supposed to go. In one particular part, the game wanted me to go to a mansion. Go visit this guy at a mansion. The waypoint told me to go here, so I did, and it was the sewers. I cleared the sewers, came out the other end. The waypoint said it was where I just came from. Huh? So I go back, now I'm lost in the sewers, I don't understand. Oh no, the actual mansion was on the other side of the map, but the game never gave you the proper waypoint. And that happened 2 to 3 times during my playthrough, where I'm just running in circles like an asshole, not knowing where the hell to go because they screwed up the waypoints in the game, and that's really frustrating too. So, the game isn't bad. The game is functional. If you don't care about getting a good ending, you could turbo through the game just drinking the blood of people and make yourself a much more powerful vampire and feel a lot more powerful, but you're probably going to be disappointed with a shitty ending, okay? Or if you want to get the good guy ending, you could do that, but then you're going to have a much tougher time with the game and probably get frustrated at how over-leveled everything is compared to you near the end of the game. So really, you pick your poison. You know what I mean? Like, do you want a shitty ending that you can turbo through, or do you want a good ending that you really suffer to get to? And I think innately that's kind of the flaw with the game. Neither scenario is very fun, right? Like, neither scenario seems like a good ending scenario. Where's a scenario where you enjoy yourself plus get a good ending? doesn't really exist in this game, and I think that's one of the critical flaws. The combat is nowhere near as good as the combat of Bloodborne and Dark Souls. They try so hard to do like those games, and it does not really turn out that well. A lot of times the camera's not very good. The fact, like I said, near the end of the game, you're fighting multiple bosses at once in confined spaces. They can 1 to 2 shot kill you. Really annoying. And the fact that you're just so underleveled if you go for the good ending, right? I didn't like that. And again, the fact the game is not paced well. The game is not balanced well, where you have a ton of story, then a ton of combat, instead of both intertwined, right? It's not good in that regard. For me, I did most of the side content. I think there were very few side missions I did not do in the game. Maybe 2 or 3 that I came across that I didn't bother with. It took me upwards of around roughly 20 to 22 hours to beat this game and get the good ending. Never drinking the blood of any NPCs. And I would say probably within the course of the campaign, there were 3 major times when I ran into a wall where it was very, very tough because I had not drank any blood and gotten that bonus experience. So that definitely extended the length of my playthrough. If you're just drinking blood left and right and don't give a fuck about getting the good ending, you could probably beat the game within 10 to 15 hours because you'll be so overleveled you just mash your buttons through everything and nothing can kill you. But for me, it was way tougher because I just didn't have that advantage, okay? And then once you actually kill the final boss, just to tell everyone, there's actually a giant epilogue, like over an hour, an extra chapter of just dialogue at the end of the game to give you the answers you're seeking. So if you did painstakingly take your time to not drink the blood of people, and you like the lore of the game and you want a good ending, you will get it, but it's just a lot of freaking work to get to that point, okay? From what I can tell you, this is not a bad game, Vampyr, but it's definitely a game that seems like it's the first step towards something good. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there were 2 teams. One team worked on the story and dialogue trees. One team worked on the combat, and they kind of sat down at the end and just taped it together with tape instead of saying, oh, let's make sure that all of this flows nicely and connects and is balanced and paced well. It's just kind of stuck together like, with some freaking Elmer's glue. And because of that, it doesn't feel like a good organic flow. It more feels like a disjointed mess, and it screws you over, okay? So honestly, it's not a bad game, but honestly, I feel like I wasted too much time on it. I felt like to get to the ending that I wanted to get, because I wanted to get the good ending, was such an investment of time. I don't feel like I got my time's worth out of it. For what I put into it, I don't feel I got out of it what I wanted. This game, quite frankly, would have been better if it was like a series of novels. I would like to read the Vampyr novels from the authors at Don't Nod, who make like a 12-book series investigating Gothic London and Dr. Reed and all the interesting characters. There's a vampire club he runs into. There's underground monsters in the sewers. All his encounters with these and, different things that happen. I'll read a series of books, because that's what it feels like. This game should have been books. It should have never been a video game with combat that falls flat on its face, that is nowhere near as good as what it's trying to emulate with the From Software series. And, the dialogue trees that just go on for way too long. If you're going to give me a story like that, give me a series of books. Don't make a video game, because this game did not become a digestible, entertaining situation. Instead, it just became more of a hassle, more of a tedium thing. My stream viewers were bored. Frequently, I was bored with it because it was not paced properly. And quite frankly, if I hadn't invested 10 to 12 hours before we hit kind of the wall where it started becoming incredibly boring, I probably would have never finished it. But I'd already invested so much time at that point, I pushed forward and I persevered and beat it. Okay? Oh, yes. And I should bring this up. I'm not going to spoil. I'm just going to say smooth werewolf asses. So if you're interested in smooth werewolf asses, you should definitely play this game. Ladies and gentlemen, I give Vampyr a 5.5 out of 10. It's not a terrible game. It's functional, but it's just not fun. It never at any point, the only point of the game that I actually was having fun was when I was in the middle of a big story plot point. Oh, a big reveal about this character. Oh, now at the end of the game, we finally get our answers we've been waiting for 20 hours. But the journey was so tedious and difficult that it wasn't worth the end. You see what I mean? Like, a lot of people say it's all about the journey, not the end. In this case, the journey wasn't very good. The end was a good payoff for the story concluding, but the journey there wasn't very good. And in that case, it's kind of it bites itself in its own ass. If the journey was great and the ending was kind of shitty, well, I'd still say the game was a good game, except it had a bad ending. It's the opposite. The ending is good, but the journey there, an unbalanced mess, not good combat, sacrificing yourself to not drink the blood to get the good ending, and then ending up having a terrible experience with a lot of over-leveled enemies. It's just not very fun. And so I give Vampyr a 5.5 out of 10. If you like Gothic-style horror stories with a British twist or Sherlock Holmes-style games, this will be your cup of tea. But if you're actually looking for, is this a game like Bloodborne? No, you're not going to like this game whatsoever. You're going to find it very boring, very tedious, and I get the feeling most people are probably going to end up skipping it because it's not very good. All right, that is it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching my review of Vampyr. Thank you. I appreciate many of you who actually toughed through in the 3 weeks, on and off that I was playing the game to beat it. Thank you for those who watched. Thanks to those watching this review. That is it for me for now. Peace out, everyone. Have a good evening, and I'll see you next time for another honest game review. Later.